For almost 4,000 years, a single civilization rose up from the desert sands, built monuments that seemed to touch the very heavens, and left behind a legacy that, honestly, still echoes in our world today. This is the epic story of ancient Egypt.
And it all starts with one thing: a river, the lifeblood of it all, the Nile. You know this ancient quote, "Hail to you, O Nile, who has come to give life to Egypt"? It isn't just some pretty poetry. It is the fundamental truth of this entire civilization. The Nile was everything: life, wealth, power. Simple as that. No Nile, no Egypt.
And we're not talking about just a few centuries here. We're talking about a continuous story that spans nearly 4,000 years. I mean, think about that. That's a longer period of time than from the fall of the Roman Empire to today. It's an incredible story of gods, of kings, of empires, and this unbelievable ambition to achieve eternity itself.
Okay, so where does a story this massive even begin? Well, we have to go all the way back to the very start to see how the predictable, steady pulse of a single river could give birth to an entire nation. What's just wild is how fast all of this happened. See, the Nile had this super predictable annual flood, which left behind this incredibly rich, fertile soil. That meant nomadic hunters could finally settle down. These settlements grew into villages, and then those villages organized themselves into provinces, which they called nomes. This whole process created a surplus of everything: food, time, people, and that set the stage for the final, most important step.
And this was the moment Egypt as we think of it was really born. The nomes in the south, that's Upper Egypt, and the ones in the northern delta, Lower Egypt, they were brought together under one single ruler. This didn't just create a country, it created a whole new idea: the pharaoh, a living god who was the lord of these two lands. This concept, this duality, would define Egypt forever.
So, with the country finally unified, Egyptian ambition just exploded onto the world stage, in the form of literal mountains made of stone. This period was the Old Kingdom, an era when the pharaohs weren't just kings, they were considered gods walking among mortals.
The key word for this whole era was stability. Just incredible, rock-solid stability. The pharaoh's power was absolute, seen as a divine command that let him use the resources of the entire nation for one single-minded purpose: building his personal stairway to the heavens. The Great Pyramids, they're not just tombs, they are symbols of a perfectly organized state-level machine, a testament to the pharaoh's unbelievable power.
But, no golden age lasts forever. After centuries of stability, the Old Kingdom just collapsed. The ancient historian Manetho captured the sheer chaos of this time, what we call the First Intermediate Period, with this incredible line. He wrote of 70 kings who ruled for 70 days. It just paints this picture of total political breakdown, where power was meaningless and the country had completely fallen apart.
But if there's one thing that you need to know about Egypt, is that its story is one of resilience. Out of that chaos, the nation was about to be reborn, somehow stronger and even more ambitious than before, totally ready to build an empire. It was a Theban prince, a guy named Mentuhotep II, who fought to piece the kingdom back together, kicking off what we now call the Middle Kingdom. And to celebrate this huge achievement, he took the royal name Sematawi, which means the unifier of the two lands. Egypt was whole again. But a new and maybe even greater crisis was looming just over the horizon.
And that brings us to a huge question, one that would define the entire next chapter of Egyptian history. How does a civilization, a proud one, bounce back from a foreign invasion? Because for the first time, foreign rulers, the Hyksos, had settled in the Nile Delta and taken control of Lower Egypt. How on earth could they recover from that kind of humiliation?
The tension from this period is just perfectly captured in the bizarre excuse for war that followed. Seriously, the Hyksos king, Apophis, ruling up north, sent a message to the Theban pharaoh 800 kilometers south, complaining that his hippos were too loud and keeping him awake. I mean, come on. This was never about hippos. It was a power play, the spark that was about to set off a massive war of liberation. And the cost of that war was just immense. The pharaoh who answered that challenge, Seqenenre-Tao, he paid the ultimate price. His actual mummy, found centuries later, has these horrific wounds all over his head from axes and daggers. It is visceral, undeniable proof of the brutal face-to-face combat he was in, leading his armies. He literally died in battle, fighting to free his country.
But his sacrifice was absolutely not in vain.
His sons eventually drove out the Hyksos and founded the New Kingdom. And this wasn't just, getting things back to normal. This was a total transformation. Egypt became a militaristic imperial superpower, dead set on never being invaded again. This was the era of legends: Tutankhamun, Hatshepsut, and the Great Ramesses.
And speaking of Ramesses the Great, this quote comes right from his own propaganda about the Battle of Kadesh, one of the largest chariot battles in human history. He paints this picture of himself as a lone warrior, abandoned by his cowardly troops, single-handedly turning the tide against the entire Hittite Empire. It's an amazing story of heroism, but it's not exactly the whole story.
The reality behind all that PR was, in a way, even more incredible. The battle itself was more of a bloody stalemate, and its true result was this: the world's first ever recorded international peace treaty. And this thing was stunningly modern. It set up a defensive alliance, and it even had rules for extraditing political refugees. Turns out, the great war hero Ramesses was also a pretty pragmatic diplomat.
But it wasn't all just military might and treaties during this time. The New Kingdom also saw one of the most radical shakeups in all of history. The pharaoh Akhenaten basically threw out thousands of years of tradition. He got rid of the entire pantheon of gods and replaced them with a single deity, the Aten, the physical disk of the sun. He moved the capital city, he completely changed the art style to be more realistic, he shattered the power of the priests. It was a top-down revolution and, well, it didn't last. As soon as he died, Egypt rushed to erase his memory and put everything back the way it was.
After the incredible heights of the New Kingdom, Egypt began a long, slow decline. The age of empire was over, and the land of the pharaohs would soon become the prize for new rising powers in the world.
Yeah, this timeline really tells a clear story, doesn't it? Libyans, Nubians from the south, Assyrians, Persians, one after another, foreign powers came and conquered Egypt. Alexander the Great was actually welcomed as a liberator from the Persians, and his general, Ptolemy, founded a whole new Greek-speaking dynasty. The last of that line was, of course, Cleopatra. She gambled for power, and she lost, and in 30 BC, the story of independent Egypt came to an end. It became just another province of Rome.
Let's just pause for a second and think about the scale of all this. Just these three major periods of stability and greatness, the Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms, they add up to almost 1,300 years. Three distinct golden ages, separated by periods of total chaos and then rebirth. The sheer longevity of this civilization is, well, it's just staggering.
And here's the crazy part. Even when Egypt was ruled by foreigners, its culture was so powerful, so immense, that it often just absorbed its conquerors. Libyan, Nubian, and Greek rulers all called themselves pharaohs. They worshipped Egyptian gods. They built temples in the Egyptian style. The political body of Egypt might have been conquered, but its soul endured.
So after all of these dynasties, these invasions, the triumphs and defeats, what's the ultimate legacy? What did ancient Egypt really give to the world that still matters to us today?
Well, their legacy is pretty much all around us. It's in the monumental architecture we still marvel at today. It's in the very idea of an afterlife that has shaped countless religions and belief systems. Their early discoveries in medicine, in math, in tracking the stars, they laid the groundwork for sciences that came much later. Egypt didn't just build pyramids. In many ways, it built some of the very foundations of our modern world.
In the year 394 AD, on a small island temple called Philae, a priest carved the last known hieroglyphic inscription. It was the end of a writing system that had been used for more than 3,000 years. But as we've rediscovered this incredible civilization, we've learned something amazing. The ancient tongue might have fallen silent for a time, but its story, its voice, that was truly eternal.
History isn't dust, it's a journey through time. Here on History LM, we tell it simply and fast. If you love discovering the past in just a few minutes, hit like and follow History LM. Your next journey through time is waiting.